Okay, so I do appreciate those of you who are on screen. Thank you very much. And as I say, I'm going to try and check chats and things like that. But if I miss a hand, do feel free to interrupt me. So we're here to talk about the ABP Awards and entering for this year in 2025. So if you have done this before, thank you for returning to be sure that you get the best quality entry you can. It does make a difference to the marking and assessment process if we do have people who've been really informed in how they present their work. Having said that, by way of a brief introduction of me, so my name's Clodagh. Back in 2013, I was chair of the ABP when I first decided that the awards were a necessary thing for the industry. And it's been extremely exciting to see that the awards are now, well, we hit a decade last year. We had our 10th year celebration of the awards last year. So the fact that the awards have now become part of a lot of people's routine for reviewing and kind of benchmarking their work in the industry is really, really rewarding for me personally. And I have a huge vested interest in ensuring that your entry, if you make one, is a positive experience, because naturally we want to perpetuate having repeating submissions from people who are successful. Or indeed, if you're not for any reason, that you should come back and do better next time. So just in case this is your first exposure to the ABP, just to give you a little bit of context, the Association for Business Psychology started as a group in 2000 of people who felt that business psychology specifically was something that warranted attention beyond industrial, organizational, occupational, and other parts of psychology. And ever since then, with the view, with the founding fathers kind of perspective that we should be as inclusive as possible, the ABP continues on its mission to provide a home and a voice to all of those in the industry. So it is a membership body, it is a not-for-profit, and it is volunteer-led. So we always welcome support. The awards specifically, as I mentioned, are just past 10 years old. They were the first, or part of the first two initiatives that the ABP took in terms of setting standards in the industry in the UK, and that is why they are so important to us. Since then, we've been able to mature our standards very significantly, which is kind of coming full circle, but I'll say a little bit more about that in terms of marking criteria. So what we're going to look at today, and hopefully this is what you're expecting, we're going to look at who is eligible to enter. The answer is pretty much anyone, but we'll just clarify in case you've got any concerns to specific topics. We'll look at the categories, which are intentionally broad, and how they get used once we get entries. We'll talk about how to enter, what's best to include in your entry, and then how the judges will assess it. So that you have a clear sense of what you're trying to talk to when you decide what to include or exclude in content. So firstly, as I've said, the ABP is very intent on being inclusive and accessible, and these values inform our eligibility criteria. So you do not need to be a person who identifies themselves as a business psychologist. You don't need to be a member of the ABP or registered or having earned the title of certified business psychologist. Whilst all of that is very desirable within our membership, of course, we are open as a membership body to everybody, and the awards are open to everybody that has an interest in applying business psychology or indeed is using an evidence base in any part of their work based on, behavioral science or other schools of psychology. So with that in mind, we keep the awards accessible, so there is no charge to enter. Being a not-for-profit, we naturally need to cover our costs, but we don't seek to make money unnecessarily. The intention is to make things as accessible as possible to all financially as much as anything else. So everybody waits for me to tell them there's a catch and they have to pay later. That is not the case. If you would like to attend the awards dinner, there is a price for that, but you do not need to pay to enter the awards or to become a finalist or to be mentioned or spotlighted in that context. And also because the ABP has the value of building capability in the industry, promoting business psychology, and also generally supporting the development of others, we do use information from the entries in a public way. So please read the terms and conditions, be really clear. There is an intention to share what you share. If you have content you need to share, which we cannot pass on, be very clear about that. But generally, for the most part, assume that what you share with us can and should be able to be shared publicly. Indeed, we've got books out there which demonstrate how great the awards have been for collecting case studies and practical examples. Okay, now a little bit of the thinking behind some of the other eligibility criteria that may be of use to you. We stipulate that work described in your entry, if it's an excellence category specifically, but also for the best categories, should have been done in the past 36 months with new information from the past 12 months. The thinking on the 36 months is that we want to be sure that we're keeping up to date with things that are happening and not just rehashing old stories. But we also recognize a period of time may lapse during a process being deployed or an intervention being created and deployed and evaluated. So we do allow for it to have finished up to maybe 36 months ago. But we ask that there be information from the past 12 months, which is our way of saying, don't just put the same entry in every year. If you've had success from an ongoing initiative that you have entered in the past, you can enter it again. But we want to know what's new and what's different and why you've come back to the competition this time, not just to, repeat what you said before. So that's the thinking on the timing. If you need an exception there, I don't see that there would be many, but you can always let us know if there's something you want to talk about. From a submission perspective, we ask that every submission have work that was either carried out in or had activity in or was relevant in the United Kingdom. Our reason for this is not to be exclusive, but it is to state explicitly that when our judges assess entries, they are taking a British perspective to that. They will have an insight into business practice in the United Kingdom and therefore be able to evaluate assessment and assess on that basis. They will not necessarily have international experience, not all of them, and they won't necessarily have practiced business psychology abroad. Some have, but not all. So we ask that you understand that our criteria and the criteria we are applying are those that we can do with confidence. And that's why we default to the UK standard, which is a very high standard indeed. So that shouldn't be a problem. Finally, we are asking that everybody register their intention to enter no later than the 10th of October this year so that we can line up our assessors and work through entries as quickly as possible when they're all received, which should be no later than the 17th of October. We will announce the finalists by the end of November, and the winners will be announced at a gala dinner on the first night of conference for 2026, which will be June 11, 2026. That will be at Brentford Lock. So full terms and conditions for entry are on the forms. Please do read them through, but those are the highlights of what you need to know. Before I continue to the categories, are there any immediate questions or concerns? Looking good, thank you, June. The headshake is useful. Okay, so, we just look like we don't. No, we're good. Right. In terms of categories, what we do is we intentionally keep the categories light because what we want to be able to do is expand them in response to demand. So, for example, in the assessment category, it's very common for us to split that between large-scale assessments and one-on-one assessments, or potentially between recruitment assessment and employee assessment, or potentially between technology used in assessment, such as, scalable enterprise solutions for psychometrics or something, or innovative approaches to interviewing, maybe like what HireVue did one year, they entered with that sort of thing, AI being used to, evaluate things. So we're going to split this out probably based on who we enter. We always get a lot of entries in the assessment space, but we don't make you decide where best your entry will fit. Once it comes in, once we can see what the division is amongst the distinguishing features are between the category, the entrants, we will then define the category at a subcategory level to incorporate as many people as possible that have submitted, quality work. Similarly, with learning and development, we don't have a coaching versus leadership development versus training sort of category. Any part of that type of work can go into L&D, and we will then split it out as appropriate to what we get. It's very common for us to split between, say, coaching as a specialist intervention compared to more generalist development centers and programs. It's also quite common that we get enough entries to make leadership development special, but really we're going to take it based on what we find comes into the base this year. Workplace well-being addresses anything and everything that could contribute to well-being or indeed be a measure of its outcome. It's a little bit broad to include things like engagement and stuff here, but it has been done sometimes. But things like diversity, inclusion initiatives, facilitating that kind of engagement with individuals, recognition of neurodiversity, all of those type of interventions have been recognized in the workplace well-being category. Again, to be split. Now, the next two categories are intentionally vague. They may overlap with those above, but they also may be different. And these, so I mentioned earlier, when the awards started, we didn't have a framework for practice at an individual level. So we developed standards for assessment of the psychology awards, the business psychology awards. Subsequently, we have created a standard and a framework for certification of individuals who are practitioners in this industry. I won't go into that right now, but what we've done is that these categories reflect the categories of certification evidence that we seek to invite people to submit. So people who are being certified as business psychologists will usually have practiced in at least two of these areas. People going for a certified principal business psychologist will usually have practiced in three or more of these areas or have very, very deep expertise. So if you're on your journey to certification, no prior education is required as long as you're putting your work, business psychology, into practice. Consider these headings for that purpose. So the difference principally between behavioral interventions and organizational effectiveness is your intervention intended to affect and work at the individual level, or are you looking for a broader change to happen at a group level? So behavioral interventions, you may affect 10 or 20 or 1,000 people, but you're looking for individual and you're measuring at an individual scale. Whereas organizational effectiveness could be things like engagement, but it could also be performance improvement initiatives, talent management, networks, and that sort of thing. Okay. Any questions on the excellence categories? Because that's typically where the case studies go, or examples of particular products and specific solutions are usually put into those categories. Good. Looks like it. Okay. So then the best categories only started a few years ago, and the intention here is to recognize not just pieces of work, but a body of work by an individual or an organization. So again, we've kept it quite high level. We've got the best business psychology supplier of the year, so that would likely be a consultancy that operates with clients external to itself. Then we've got in-house teams or practitioner of the year. And again, we recognize, again, we want to include even small businesses. So there may only be one business psychologist or one person using business psychology in a small company, or indeed there could be a center of expertise with a broader base in a bigger company. Those entries are all put together there. If we get a lot of entries, we could split that out, but we don't want to assume to do so until we get the support we need to make that competitive. Then the psychology practitioner of the year, you can enter it for yourself or you can enter it for somebody else. You can nominate somebody for that. Indeed, it could be a colleague of yours, your boss, or them for their star performance. That's up to you. And then there's the Rising Star Award. So this is anybody who's in their early career of business psychology practice, and it could be that they left university in the last couple of years, but we do suggest if they were formally trained that they be within 2 years of their graduation, because after that we would expect practice in the other categories. And the intention here is just, it's an ongoing tribute to Peter Saville. He did invest a lot in the ABP and he also contributed a huge amount to the industry. And so we've done that. We've renamed what used to be the Student Awards in his honor. Moving along, what we do is we give you the option to enter a particular category. If you are at all unsure, as you can tell, it's probably going to change after you apply for the awards anyway, what exactly you get nominated to. So feel free. This year, we've actually left an option in the tick box to say, just let the judges decide where your entry is best. So feel free to use that if you're unsure of where your entry would fit best. There was one last year, just for illustration, where actually it was an entry for one of the best categories as a consultancy, but they gave such a strong case study in that respect, they ended up being shortlisted in the assessment category as well. So you don't need to, I mean, obviously the forms are a little different. We don't want that kind of change happening if we can help it. But if you're unsure, feel free to leave it at my discretion to allocate your entry accordingly. I've read hundreds of entries now over the last 11 years. I've pretty much read, I think, 90% of all the entries received. So I'm kind of pretty familiar with how to group things appropriately to make sure they get the best chance of being recognized by the judges for what's distinctive and good about them. Then what you can know is, even if you said this could be well-being, this could be development, whatever, what do you want, put it where you like, we will put it in one category. You can enter 3 times. If it's the same entry, it's going in one category at the end. So don't bother to kind of like say, oh, I'll enter it 4 times, I'll copy and paste the document 4 times. It's only going to end up in one place, and we will definitely seek to put it in the best place. Finally, most years we find that we have good examples of innovation. I know, Jovan, you said that you're, for example, working with AI and technology. So it's very possible that you'll be looking to do something quite interesting and innovative. We would still ask that it meet one of the criteria for the other categories. But if we find that there are exceptionally innovative entries coming through, we reserve the right, and in most years have created an innovation category apart from the rest. So do assume we'll be looking out for that, and we will recognize it if it's appropriate in context of the entries. And finally, anyone and everybody that enters can be recognized for the Chair's Choice Award. That is up to the Chair. She reads a selection of the ones that the judges feel are the most outstanding, and they don't necessarily need to have won another category for her to say that she particularly appreciates what they have brought. The Chair at this time is Claire Lish. She is herself an ABP Award winner, as well as a lot of other things. She's got a very broad scope of experience in the industry, so she could probably bring some quite original thinking to what she feels she'd like to showcase for the Chair's Choice Award. But those are not categories that you can enter. They're up to us. I mention it only because if you go to the previous winners page, you might go like, oh, everybody is winning this Chair's Choice each year. How do I do that? So that's how you do that. You just be amazing. So I'm going to close out on the categories there. Do we have specific questions before I rush on to what's next? Keeping it brief so we can all go back to work or lunch. So when it comes to entry, this year we are asking that people register in advance. As I say, that's to help us better align our resources behind the load that's going to hit us when we close the entries. For your purposes, you can download the 2 entry forms. All these links are on the website. If you struggle to find them for any reason, please do come, just drop a note to me or the team at admin@theabp.org.uk. You can also reach me, clodagh.o'reilly@theabp.org.uk. If you've got questions, feel free to get in touch to get those addressed in a timely fashion. When it comes to finally submitting your entry, it will be done as an attachment to an email, please. It needs to have the reference that we'll send you when you register, and then you can just email it to admin@theabp.org.uk. There is this registration form, which was on the link on the previous page, where you would register your interest before the 10th of October. I say 10th of October, it's like midnight on the 10th of October. You'll notice that question 1 asks the people who would be recognized for the work. So this might be the name of the actual consultants, for example, who did the work, or indeed the head of HR or something. I don't know. It depends on your organization and context. From question 4 onward, however, we ask who we should be in touch with. So that's the person we're going to follow up with. We're going to give news to. We're going to give reminders to. We're going to give reference numbers to. So when it comes to if somebody is a winner or a finalist, we will announce the names in question 1. But when it comes to telling you that you've become a finalist, we will actually contact person 4 to tell them that that's happening. So do just distinguish if you need to. If it's all you, that's fine. Put your name everywhere, that's fine. But if, and I know Nigel, for example, you write with different team members in mind and you've got different categories. So feel free to distinguish between those two types of name and contact info. Right. So when it comes to filling in the application form, once you've downloaded it, you will see that there is some stuff that's not assessed. So your title is not assessed. Also, your overall project summary. We want you to give us some context that could be about the industry, it could be about the company that you were working in, it could be about a particular time. You know, for example, a lot of people were referencing the issues around COVID in 2020 or 2021. If there is a particular context within which the work has a relevance, you're welcome to position that in your overall project summary of 100 words. A lot of people also use this to really just catch a judge's attention of what they think is special in their entry that they want the judges to then look for and pull out once they start reading. But then what is assessed is a new category this year called the evidence base. I say category, it's not a category, sorry, a new section. So I had noticed over the years that people were giving us different levels of referencing for their work. So some people would say, you know, obviously we applied the science of psychometrics, for argument's sake, and another person would give me 5 or 6 or 10 papers on why SJTs are valid and why numerical capacity is, you know, a good predictor of performance and why conscientiousness matters and how to measure locus of control. I don't even know. All sorts of things. But I think a lot was happening where some people assumed that the judges just know stuff, and others assumed that, you know, just listing 78 resources was going to be impressive. Now, I think neither extreme is ideal. If you look at what we've collated from past entries, and that's particularly in the book that we launched this year, which I'll tell you about later, you'll see that we do look to prove that something's relevant to business psychology by saying what science was behind it. Was there, for example, a psychometric that was used in the development program? Then how do you know that that was a good psychometric to use? What is the validity of that tool? Rather than just saying, well, we used the Hogan or we used the Lumina, so it must be great. Don't make that assumption. Let us know what it was that made you feel that it was an appropriate tool to use. Or indeed, you know, reference works, frameworks. It's business psychology, so there could be just very well-regarded frameworks that are not necessarily psychologically informed so much as maybe, you know, change models and things. We're giving you up to 1 page to tell us that. It's not got a word limit. We're just saying, if it's more than a page, you're probably telling us too much. Keep it briefer than that. Pick your best content and tell us which of the sciences and evidences that you were informed by you'd like us to be aware of. So that's where we're starting off on the entry forms now. So that's completely new. If you've got questions, I would say have a look at the book and have a look at the glossary for the book, because that kind of tells you how people have used hundreds of models, and it'll give you a sense of the type of thing that would have been potentially applicable if you haven't already found the right resources. Rather don't just ChatGPT this. I would say, you know, have a look at things that directly correlate to the impact you were trying to have and gave you a reason to believe that you would have the impact you intended. So, as I say, this is new for this year. The evidence-based applied, no word limit, but maximum of 1 page. And let me just mention it here. I'll stipulate this at the end. Again, if there is a word limit that we apply, if there is a page limit that we apply, what you put behind that or after that, we delete. We have to keep things fair before the judges. So if you want to be sure that you're in control of what the judges are going to see, don't run over, because it'll just be deleted and you could end up having included stuff that was less valuable and having the judges miss out on stuff that was more valuable. And of course, if you want to go for a size 6 font, well, then I think you're probably just stretching the intention a little bit. Try to be respectful of the judges' time. And then new for 2025 is that once you get into providing the body of the work, we've always had a 1,500 word limit. But we have sometimes stipulated we wanted the challenge in 400 words and the implementation in 600 words. We're not doing that anymore. We're just saying you've got 3 sections and 1,500 words. You go ahead and use them to best effect. If you really need to, you know, if your diagnostic stage was super deep, you might want to put some more attention into the upfront piece of the challenge. Whereas if you've got fantastic evidence at the end, you might want to put more word count into the evaluation. So this year we're letting you do you to best reflect practice and your results. Slide. So for those 1,500 words, they are the same 3 sections that there have been pretty much from, the first entry forms. There's a challenge section, an approach section, and an evaluation section. So the challenge is where we typically learn about why you started the process, what was going on that led to an opportunity for business psychology to be the solution. In the approach, we ask how you defined what needed to be done, designed what would be done, and implemented what was done, and then how you evaluated that. If you shortchange the evaluation piece, it will probably let you down, because ultimately that's where, that's where psychology meets business, is when we prove we had an impact that the business cared about, and indeed potentially on the bottom line. So whatever your key performance indicators were, whatever metrics you have, it could be qualitative, it could be quantitative, whatever evidence you have, a mix is ideal, but do include the best that you have. And then conversationally, if you have had the opportunity to control for other explanations, for example, that they also happen to have a merger or an acquisition at the same time, or the team was, going through other change or recruiting in new people or whatever. If there are other factors that could and should have been accounted for, you might want to mention those. And we always find it useful to hear when you had lessons learned. Very often something is done and then repeated, and we find that people's reflections on what they learned helps them do it better next time. And then we can share that with others as a lesson too. So feel free to reflect that it's not a judged criteria, but it is an admirable practice. It's part of the consulting cycle. Okay. So for excellence categories, now this is a lot of small text. If you want a copy of this deck, I'll put it in the resource center on the ABP Hub. Or you can mail me to get a copy. And this is what we use for certification of business psychologists, right? Is we confirm that they are adept at working through consulting cycles with their clients in-house or externally. And that means advising, diagnosing, designing, implementing, and evaluating in nice little routines, right? This is described here as for the excellence categories, but the fact that a consultancy or a team or an individual would use this approach consistently should also be reflected in the best categories, not just for the case studies. But these are words that are taken from the judges' briefings. So what they are looking for is recorded here. Of course, we've got more information for them too. But the advice piece is very much about demonstrating that you could build credibility using your evidence base as the foundation for what you would do, that you did take time to truly understand the problem, and you did so in an informed and scientific and data-based way, if possible, rather than just, anecdotally or very lightheartedly, oh, they paid us for it, so we gave it to them. That's not always, that's not the best way to have a good outcome. The design aspect, you can do as much or as little as you want on this one. But the fact is, for example, in some categories like assessment, the design phase is super important. How you ensure that the data you were using and applying mattered. So, again, use the word count as you need to. Implementation is about bringing it to life, and it's often a staged thing. In the older days, before 2023, 2024, we used to call this stakeholder management and project management. Those were the 2 descriptions. But now this is all kind of coming into the implementation stage. But it should still be as thoughtful, because it's still a business intervention at the end of the day. So, showing best practice, that we're practicing professionals in appreciating our business audience is ideal. And finally, the evaluation. And if I need to tell you how to evaluate your work, then chances are this might not be the year for you to enter. Maybe you want to do a bit more research and come back next year. But evaluation, as I've said, can be anecdotal. It can be qualitative feedback. It can be, testimonials from clients. But we really appreciate it if you've got some before and after measures that are comparative and show some incremental growth, or indeed other markers of change that you were able to record. Financial outcomes always go down extremely well with the judges when they're available, if you've got an improved performance and a return on investment that you can demonstrate. Or at least if you've got one predicted and you can talk to a decent base on the, for your prediction. Okay. When it comes to the best categories, there's three things that the judges are looking for. You can see that they're very similar to what would come to life in a case study. Firstly, the business psychology practice overview. So what distinguishes you as a team that use business psychology consistently compared to something else? So this might be intellectual property that you have. This might be frameworks that you use consistently. I know we saw a really good entry from GSK one year from their change team, because their change team are just, they've got a series of really good change models that they've found very effective. So what is it that makes your work consistently evidence-based and a good reflection of business psychology? And that probably would include something around the quality assurance of the consistency, not simply that it exists, but also that you have training to back it up, enablement, reviews, whatever. The consulting skills in practice is where you talk to the consulting cycle and how, again, you may have your own way of doing this, but again, how do you ensure that this is happening consistently throughout your practice, that you don't get pulled, especially in-house teams. I've been, in-house in many companies. It can be quite demanding to just do what the client wants, or, what your boss tells you is important. So the fact that you bring it back to how did I actually still get to the heart of the issue and diagnose appropriately so that I could measure effectively. That's the type of thing to talk to. And finally, to be the best, we do ask that you wouldn't just do this in an isolated and introspective way, but advocating for business psychology is something that's important to us. So we would want the people who are the best in the industry to do so out loud, as it were, to be sharing best practice, to be teaching others how to do it, to be mentoring, to be coaching, to be bringing on junior or new next generation talent. That type of stuff, advocating for business psychology, is also evidence that we would seek. Okay, each of those sections gets 500 words for the best categories. That's just to give you some sense of the need to balance the three dimensions. I think I just spoke to all of this. Sorry, I should have jumped to the slides sooner, but hopefully that, covers what you need to know. So as I've said, if you want a copy of the deck, just drop me a note, and I'm happy to share that as well. Do we have any questions before I go on to just the writing style that goes down well with the judges? We all good? I'm getting bored of my own voice. I'm sure you're getting bored of my voice too. So thank you for bearing with me. Just want to share as much as possible to ensure that you feel equipped for what comes next. So what comes next is how best to make your point. So relevant context really helps. You could have, we often get entries from Lumina, and there are many agents around the world who have used their tools in everything from change initiatives, well-being initiatives. We had last year from Lumina with work with Syrian refugees to help them build their confidence to integrate into new environments. But the bottom line is, it's understanding the context that matters there, not the fact that Lumina may have a robust tool that was used, right? So bringing to life why this was the time, this was the moment, this was the opportunity to make a real difference is really helpful to take the judges on the journey with you. But never shy away from the evidence base. Be really clear why you believed what you were doing was the best thing you could possibly do. How did you know? What gave you the confidence that you could predict a positive outcome before you even started, and of course, hopefully iterated from there. And then there's just good general practice. Write in plain English, be as concise as possible. The word count is tight if you've got a big story to tell, so you're doing yourself a favor not to be verbose. Also, it's just natural, especially when the judges are reading multiple things. Sentences that run on get lost. They lose the focus, they lose the input. So using shorter sentences means that they will get the points that you're trying to make, as opposed to being overly conversational in that respect. Avoid jargon. Again, we do have some judges that, whilst they have worked and lived in the UK, have also worked and lived abroad. Some may be speaking English as a second language. We absolutely trust their professional English, but they may not be familiar with everyday terms that you might use. Or indeed, you may have developed terms that were appropriate to another culture or environment because you worked abroad, with your practice. So just be really clear to not make any assumptions about what the people reading may know or assume. And the same applies to when you say, like, oh, well, we used, so-and-so's 8 Staccatas model for change. Like, yeah, sure, you may have a good reason to believe that's a great model, but you should stipulate why, not just assume that everybody would know what it is. And indeed, I would say call out, which of the steps was applied in which ways to keep that resonating with the judges. And then if you want to win and say that you're the best, tell us why you think so. It's not very British to brag about ourselves, I know that. But drawing attention directly to things that you feel were exceptional is helpful. So think about the words you might choose to do that. But don't be shy to say, in this way, this was, a better result than we would have anticipated otherwise, or in this way, this result exceeded their previous experience, or in this way, we achieved something that was noteworthy, exceptional, and so on. Because again, if they've read the whole thing and they've missed the thing that you thought was the highest, most priority point, it would be very disappointing if they've maybe taken that for granted, whereas you know that in that particular industry, it's never happened before. So do call it out. Okay. Once you've made your point in all of the marked content, so that's the 100-word intro, that's not marked, then you've got your evidence base, which is considered, then there's the 1,500 words that are marked. You have the option to still add supporting content, and you have the option to acknowledge people it helped. Particularly students, we encourage to reference, for example, somebody who mentored them or guided them in their work. But indeed, anybody, a consultancy might recognize their clients, a client might recognize the consultancy. That's, whatever you feel is appropriate. And this is just about recognizing that we all collaborate to get the outcomes that we achieve. But to be clear, if you do put excessive content, I've had entries where the supporting content was 23 pages. It's not that it's not pretty, but the judges cannot be asked to look at 23 pages for every entry. They will never get through them. So we do cut that off. So they will not see it. So if you want to be sure that they're going to see it, make sure that you fitted it into one page, please, and prioritize accordingly. So how do the judges judge? They are given advice on the 5 areas of the consulting cycle, in addition to, of course, having a broad experience of the practice areas like assessment and so on. We pick relevant people for each category to judge. So make sure that you can answer their questions. That was this a validated evidence-based approach? Was there clarity on the reason for the intervention? Did the context match the approach? Was the implementation thoughtful, well-planned, well-structured, and well-managed? And was the evaluation relevant and meaningful? And include, one thing that they often think about there is, like, did you miss an opportunity? Could you just have done a questionnaire before and after, and that would have given you evidence that you're otherwise saying you don't have? That type of thing. They're going to be quite focused on ensuring that the evaluation happened, because to them, that's a big part of have an impact, prove that you had an impact. For the best category, as I've said, the consulting cycle from this is all considered, but additionally, the ABP's values are considered, and that includes that external perspective. Do you promote business psychology outside of yourself and your practice? Do you demonstrate best practice in all of your work publicly and, report on that, share that, propose on that basis, and build capability within your organization and potentially your clients' organizations if you are consultants? Also, we would make assumptions about inclusion and accessibility with business psychology, but you may want to stipulate that specifically if you have initiatives or other evidence. And then this is just a sneak peek at the sort of rating scales that the judges work off, just to be sure that they've kind of got a consistent sense of where things fall. But there are, of course, other briefings and things that they get, but it is just to demonstrate to you, I'm not keeping anything from you. If it's helpful for you to know, How to Impress the Judges. Trust me, I've shared it. I spent most of my early career in this industry in assessment, so I'm very clear. If you want people to achieve against an assessment mark, you need to tell them what they're being marked against. So you have been told most of what the judges will be told, and all they bring in addition to that is their years of experience and education. So, final step, how to submit your entry. Does anybody have any questions from the marking piece before I go into this? We're good. Right. Nearly there, folks. So submitting your entry, as we've said, please register first, then download the relevant form. Keep it in MS Word. Do not make it a PDF, please, because, for example, if we need to truncate your content, we're going to do that. If you put it in a PDF, we will find a way, and we will cut it, and we will paste it, but it really is just going to waste time of our volunteers, and that will just limit how quickly we can actually get through the process of announcing finalists and things. Also, we want to be able to share the information in case studies, in books, in articles, and so on, as appropriate, especially those who are winners and, the highly commended. So to be sure that we can do that effectively and give you more visibility in the market, we'd like your content to be easily accessible to us. Do read the terms and conditions, because there are relevant things, like we mentioned, from an eligibility criteria, and they include the fact that they stipulate how confidential content can be included if absolutely necessary. And then finally, there's the admin mailbox address, again, admin@theabp.org.uk. Let us have a copy of your content by no later than midnight on the 17th of October. I will send out reminders in the week of the 10th, between the 10th and the 17th, but that is definitely the deadline. So if you have not already seen this, we did release a new book this year called Enhancing Performance at Work, which is a collection of the winners. It's a subset of the winners of the awards and a couple of highly commended entries over the past 10 years. We've got 2 more books coming, one focused on assessment and one focused on organizational effectiveness. There was a previous set of books that were done in 2015. So the assessment one is Catching Unicorns. Managed Metamorphosis is the performance individual behavior-based one, and Stars Aligned is the group and organizational effectiveness collection. So if you want to have a look at any of the past awards entries to get a sense of the competition and what you're up against, feel free to have a look at the books. The first year's awards were summarized in Delivering Excellent Workforce Experiences back in 2014. It's a bit dated now, but still some great stuff there. Etiel Drawer's entry, he was the chair's choice that year, was just fantastic. But I would say what's really great about the Enhancing Performance at Work book is we've put it in the format of the entries now, so you can see how to write to the new structure of the entries. Also, the glossary is amazing. There's well over 100 different business psychology frameworks, references, and pieces there that not only are they explained, but why they matter to business psychologists is explained. So especially if you're new in the field, it's a fantastic read. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed editing that and publishing it. So I hope you will too. Do we have any questions, though? Through everything I can tell you.
Hi, Clodagh. That was so helpful. Thank you. Can I just ask what the date was for the awards again? I just want to make sure I got that down correctly.
11th of June. So the conference for 2026 is 11th and 12th of June. It's a Thursday, Friday. Brentwood Lock is Greater London. It's to the west. And so it's got plenty of parking, really good access routes, and train links. And yeah, so that'll be conference 11th and 12th, and the awards dinner will be the night of the 11th. So we're hoping, of course, to showcase a lot of the finalists during the conference too.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, hi, Clodagh. Thank you. That was really useful. I've got 2 questions. One, the supporting evidence section. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit for me? Because I think, did you say that the assessors won't use any of the information in there to support the evaluation? So therefore, what's it
They
for?
will. Yeah, no, they will. And I think it really is the
Well,
point at which you demonstrate your credibility as a business psychologist. So it's inspired by the fact, and the reason we start with this, and if you look at the book, the reason that every single case study in that book starts with the top 3 or 4 models that were used that came to life in the entry is because it it demonstrates credibility. So if you look at the consulting cycle, traditionally accepted and the one that the ABP use for our standards, it starts off with build credibility and trust. And to build credibility and trust as a business psychologist, you need to demonstrate that you've got an informed, evidence-based approach, which will give you reliable outcomes. So starting your entry there is to build that trust almost with the judges. What did you do? What did you take? What did you have in mind that convinced you the client would benefit? And that the intervention that you were going to do mattered, and indeed, what did the client like? And I say client, and this can be in-house, this doesn't need to be an external client that I'm talking about. What was it that actually set you off that this is the way to go? Was it that we had confidence in the, Kotter's model for change, or was it that we actually were using Kolb? And it doesn't need to be 6 or 12. If you just used Kolb really effectively at every level, even using Kirkpatrick just to inform your approach to evaluation, any of those references are useful. But it just gives a sense of the level of sophistication that the judges should be looking for, and the breadth of research that was done. Some submissions are research submissions, so they should be like anchored in tons of cases. Innovation, this is a particularly key one for innovation, and I've been in my career, fortunately, had the opportunity to innovate quite a lot. And when you're doing that leap to do something innovative, you've really got to come with the confidence that you've informed it the best you can with pillars of what informs success, that of course then you have to kind of go a little off script from to do something new and for the first time. So it's building that trust with the person, that the client, the audience, that they then let you go to tell the story of what actually happened. So take it as kind of what you would have done at the beginning of the consulting cycle, either before you heard the problem or why their people called you,
Yeah.
So it might be your IP, you might say, well, actually people come to me because I've got this model, this psychometric. Well, then tell us, why is that the best one for them to have used?
Yeah, sorry, I'm in the section where you've said you can add visuals.
Oh, the supporting material.
Yes.
Sorry, Jim.
Yes.
Sorry, going off on tangents. That's not helpful. Yes, no, that is not assessed. But, so what we often find there is, for example, if people have done like an SJT that's really pretty and they want photos of how nicely they animated it, or indeed people have got IP, this is our consulting cycle, this is our, model of like our psychometrics, how we give the results. It just brings things to life. So it is useful to bring things to life, but it's not assessed because it should already have been explained as part of the content.
Okay, so I'm just a bit unclear as to why you would include anything if the assessor's not going to look at it.
Just to bring it to life. They're going to look at it. They're just not going to. They're not going to. So often also the writing could be quite small. So for example, one is the igloo. That I actually used that visual, the visual from the supporting materials. I actually used it in the book because it's just this little acronym for, how people are more likely to cope under pressure. And the fact that you kind of go into your igloo is something that kind of becomes symbolic in the storytelling around that well-being intervention. I think it was by Affinity. So you don't have to. You don't lose points for not. I'm not looking for it at all. It just, some people feel quite attached to, we look at it like this, or this is what we tell people, and they feel like their hands have been cut off if we tell them we don't care.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, my other question was, you talked about being shortlisted for awards as well as winners. Do you have how many people would you shortlist in an award category, for example?
We don't usually. So rule 1, if you enter and are not shortlisted, we will not ever tell a soul, and we will never share anything that you shared, right? So we don't put out there bad practice at all, right? If you're not going to qualify because we don't feel it's up to standard, nobody's going to know that it ever happened. And we'll obviously tell you that. And if usually I find that I can be quite specific with people as to what it was that we felt short. And I'm not offering feedback because this is an unpaid thing and we do it, as volunteers. But what I am saying is, if it's not going to qualify, we're going to let you know what it was that we felt let it down. But once it qualifies, then we kind of say, okay, it's in the public space for the fact of us then learning from it collectively. So we typically don't want a category with less than 4 entries in it. We've had 1 or 2 where we've had 3, but we still felt it was worth going ahead. But mostly you'll have 4. And above that, if it gets anywhere near like 7, I'm really looking to split it out into 2 relevant categories, right? So we really are trying to be sure that the best people get through, and then the best people have a good chance of getting positive feedback, a positive outcome. So on the awards night, we always announce for every category the 4 finalists, but also a highly commended, basically the runner-up and the winner. And that's a combination of, well, it's typically led by the judges' points, but it's their comments are also taken into account, and also the predominance of judging opinion is taken into account, not purely numbers. If they felt, I don't know, one time, for example, somebody on the numbers came out second, but actually they were more judges' favorite than anything else, and that kind of pushed them into first place. But yeah, so I would say very typically over 10 years, 90% of the time, 4 people in a category, 1 winner, 1 runner-up.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
Students, we've sometimes had 2 runners-up. Sometimes, yeah, just to spread the recognition. Sorry, yes. Was that, Jim? Anything else?
That's it. Thank you. That's clear.
Okay, cool. If anything else comes up, people are really, really welcome to get in touch with me. I really would rather see an entry because you feel confident you know what you're doing than that you don't go ahead and enter because you're feeling unsure. And just a last, if anybody on the call is not already a member of the ABP, do consider joining. It's really a very warm, supportive, inclusive community. You don't need to be a business psychologist to join. Indeed, a lot of our members are not, but also we do offer channels if people are interested in becoming certified business psychologists, whatever their background is. That's an option that's open to people, so you're very welcome to do that. But if that's it, any more for any. I'm going to let you all get back to your day, and I do hope that we'll be seeing interest from you all.
That's great. Thanks, Clodagh.
Thank you. That was
Thanks,
helpful.
everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you. Really
Bye-bye.
helpful.